the record button. I am just going to turn this over to Duke. I don't want to talk at all. So if you would, one thing I will say, if you stop your videos and mute, it makes things a little smoother for everyone when we get into it. But other than that, that's the last thing I'm going to say for a while, hopefully. So have at it, Duke.
Well, welcome, everybody. It's so good to have you with us to get together on a night like this. It's almost like being there with thousands of miles between us. But I'm really excited that we have such a nice group of tires and choices of flies tonight to work through. And so we'll go through those in order. We'll probably have 10 or 15 minutes for each of the 5 segments of the evening. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat room, and we'll monitor that, and we'll read them to whoever presentation is going on. Or you can raise your hand, and I think there's a way that we can recognize that too. And if you're not speaking, and particularly if you have a dog, put yourself on mute so we don't get a lot of background noise. I think that's about all we need to know to go forward. And so we'll go on with our first speaker. He's John Simonson, who is very experienced tire and angler up in Bayfield and Sawyer and Douglas and Ashland counties. He's a North Country angler, even if he's still got a foot in an actual home down in the southeastern part of the state. And John has done some really remarkable stuff with studying some of these older classic Wisconsin flies, and he'll tell you what his website is where he's cataloged some of them. So John, if you're ready to go, we'll share the screen with you and have at it. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Can everybody see my screen?
There it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, my name is John Simonson. As I said, I have a website called WI Fly Fisher, which is dedicated to my 47 years fly fishing in Wisconsin, the hatches, mayfly hatches, caddisfly hatches, and fishing in Wisconsin. I also started recently studying the old history of the old patterns in Wisconsin, of which one I'm going to talk about tonight, the Bass Lake Special. And without going any further, I want to start right away because Duke said 10 to 15 minutes. So when you think about fly patterns, we've seen over the years, history has a way of diminishing them over time. Not many patterns have lasted for decades, but the Bass Lake Special is one of those that has, and it is now over 80 years old. For those who don't know, and I know most of you will, the origin of the Bass Lake was developed in the 1930s by Reverend Steubenville, and he was a Lutheran minister in Clintonville, Wisconsin. He tied it with calftail and chenille for the big brook trout on Bass Lake, Ontario, is the story I'm told. So thus it became the Bass Lake Special. Steubenville's son-in-law, Earl Papp, of Marion, Wisconsin, began to tie and sell the Bass Lake Specials locally, helped grow the fly's popularity across northern Wisconsin. The original pattern tied by Steubenville and Papp was a wet fly tied with a tail of mallard flank, a body of black chenille, soft brown hackle, and a white calf-tail wing slanted back like a trude. Duke was kind enough to send me this actual photo of one of the flies he owns. It is tied by Earl Papp. He went up and visited Earl Papp in Marion, Wisconsin. And I think Duke, you said he was like 85 years old when you went and visited him. And this is one of the flies he actually tied. If you notice, the wing is behind the hackle. And this is the pattern I'm going to tie. They asked me to tie the Bass Lake pattern. There's a lot of variations, but I wanted to tie one of the originals. So I picked the Papp wet fly Bass Lake. So to begin with, we'll look at the dressing for this fly. Materials used, I use black thread, a Mustad 3906 wet fly hook. I actually used a size 10, a little bigger for my macro shots. Black chenille, white calf tail, mallard flank feather, and brown and furnace hen hackle. It's a pretty simple fly, but it is very effective. So to begin with, everybody knows to wrap the thread on the hook all the way to the back of the shank of the hook, then set the tail fibers on top of the hook shank and secure 3 or 4 thread wraps, just like it's shown in the picture. Then we take and cut a piece of chenille. And what I always do is strip off some of the chenille fibers with your fingernails. So you end up with some bare 1/4 inch long thread. The black thread's what we're actually going to secure to the hook. And this reduces the bulk of the fly when we tie it. Makes a cleaner looking fly. So then we secure the chenille bare thread onto the hook shank with a few wraps of thread, then wrap the thread forward. We want to remember at this point, you see where my thread is ended for any new people. You've got to leave enough room for the wing and the hackle and to finish the head. So I'm leaving about 1/4 of the hook shank for this fly on a size 10. So then you wrap the chenille forward, tie off and snip off the excess chenille. I tied several of these, and on a size 10 mustad with medium chenille, it was exactly 4 wraps, so the chenille was perfect for tying the fly. Next, cut the calf tail fibers. I used about 1/4 inch or a little less. Hold the tips between 2 fingers. Use your other hand to knock off the short, loose fibers and the butt ends. This reduces the bulk. And you should notice at this point, I am left-handed. So if it looks backwards to you, it's because I'm left-handed. Then don't guess for any beginners. Hold the calf tail fibers between your 2 fingers. Lay it directly over the hook. Decide the appropriate length. Generally, the tips of the fibers should extend to the bend of the hook is the way I tie them. And then pinch the fibers tightly with your fingers. Hold on top of the hook shank. It's important for new people that are beginners. If there are any beginners here, you want to pinch them tightly. So when you start wrapping, the fibers don't roll around the hook. They stay right on top of the hook shank. Then make 3 or 4 loose wraps. What I always do around the wing, tighten by pulling up, then add some more thread wraps while still holding tightly between your fingers. Then with sharp scissors, I always cut at an angle rather than straight across. This gives you a nice tapered head. A word about selecting hen feathers. We've seen a lot. You know, a few years ago, Whiting came out with the 4 Bs, and then you have a Colin hen cape there on the left, and then a feather of each. Recently, I do work for a fly shop out west, and he sent me several of 4 Bs. He said, you got to try them. I love Collins, but I said, okay, I'll try them. So the first past lake I was going to tie, I pulled one of the feathers from the brown 4B. What I noticed right away is the stem is fairly thick, it's stiff, and it's not as flexible. And that does, for any beginner, that does affect when you're trying to tie that fly. So for me personally, I prefer like a Collins hen cape feather that's thinner and more flexible and a little softer. So it's up to you, but I ended up using the Collins. So now, next, take the hen feather and strip off the webby barbs at the bottom of the feather and leave some bare stem. And you'll see that in a minute. As a general rule, when you're tying these flies, take the feather, measure the barb length to about 1.5 to 2 times the width of the gap. And you see the little red arrow there going from the shank down to the tip. So depending how you tie them, 1.5 to 2 times the width of that hook gap is how long you want the barbs to be. Then secure the feather with the bare stem, leaving a gap with the stem. I always leave a gap. I learned that trick years ago. And that helps the feather barbs from becoming unruly when you first start to wrap the feather perpendicular around the hook shank. It makes a much neater overall finished fly. It really works well with a dry fly feather. Also note how much space you're leaving for anybody new. You want to make sure you leave enough space for the 2 or 3 wraps of feather there, and then to finish the head. And then lastly, next, wrap the feather 2 or 3 times around the hook shank, then secure the tip of the feather with a couple of thread wraps, snip off the feather, whip finish, and voila, you have Pap's Pass Lake. Really a simple fly to tie, and yet very effective. Now, some of you might think, well, wait a minute, that's not how I learned how to tie the Pass Lake. There are 2 original ways that I found out with the help of a lot of some of you that are actually listening tonight. Ross Mueller's book, Flies That Catch Trout, on page 39. Ross described the Pass Lake wet fly. He noted that Steubenville tied the calf tail wing in front of the hackle, kind of a wet fly style, while Earl Papp favored the calf tail wing behind the hackle, more what I call a Trude style. This was also confirmed to me with Duke's photo they sent me of Papp's original Pass Lake. I will note that you may also see today many versions of this fly where they use peacock herl instead of chenille, golden pheasant tibbets, or brown hackle fibers. But honestly, they all work with trout. Now, I don't think you can mention the Pass Lake Special, and I talked to a lot of people, email people, without Wisconsin fishermen bringing up Larry Meyer, the Pass Lake Kid. I mean, I never met him. I wish I had. He sounds like he would have been a lot of fun to fish with, tie with, and probably drink with. For many years, Larry taught the fly tying classes for TU and obviously showed his passion for the Pass Lake Specials. As somebody said when we were first started here, the Pass Lake Special, he included the beadhead nymph, the Pass Lake wet fly, the Pass Lake spinner, the Pass Lake emerger, the Pass Lake dry fly, the Pass Lake hexachina, the Pass Lake ant. I'd probably even miss some. And the photo on the top left is from Phil Anderson, and it shows a collection of Larry's flies. And the bottom is his wet fly. And somehow, which I have no clue, I hope somebody can fill me in on this, I've never heard this before, but he's also called Dr. Sausage. And I don't know where he ever got that name.
He made sausage.
If somebody can enlighten me, I would love that. Know how he got the name Dr. Sausage.
I know.
I think he worked at Oscar Myers.
Yeah.
No.
I can help there.
Okay.
This is Phil Anderson, John.
I recognize the voice.
Larry Meyer was the MC and auctioneer of an annual fundraiser of Southern Wisconsin Fly TU chapter. And people would bring all their junk and some good stuff to the auction, and Larry was the auctioneer that would auction it off. So he would take a pile of junk and turn it into sausage. And my understanding is that's how he got the name Dr. Sausage, because he could make everything taste good, even though it was brought in as useless leftovers.
No, Phil, that's a good sounding story. It's just not right. The story on Dr. Sausage, you have to know something about his geometry. Take a look at him. Larry was about 5'6", and the girth, you're looking at a thin picture of him there. And so he was a kind of a rotund, short guy. Back in the day, when you put him in a neoprene waiter, he looked like he had just arrived from Ussinger's. He looked exactly like a case sausage, and those of us that had to suffer day after day fishing with him. And incidentally, John, he was left-handed, which explains his strangeness and maybe your interest in the fly too. I don't know. You left-handers are always very strange.
I always thought the left-handers were smarter. I don't know if I could add that to my website though.
That's a much better story, Steve. Can anybody top that one?
I can't top it, but I can corroborate it. That is the story that was told to me when I joined the Southwest TU chapter in 2000 and was introduced to Larry as Dr. Sausage. And I said, Dr. Sausage? And that was the same reasoning that was given to me as a newcomer to the group.
The one thing I'll remember about Larry was the one that started the youth fly time program down in Beaver Dam that we now have down at Poinet. And he was the one that put it together. He developed cancer and was no longer able to continue. I visited him at his home about 2 weeks before he died. And he was laying in bed in the living room and he told me, he said, Bob, because I was going to take it over, he says, do not forget the women, do not forget the children. And he squeezed my hand. He says, Bob, promise me you will not forget the kids, you'll not forget the women. And I made that promise, and that's why I'm running a program down at Poinet right now. I've done it ever since. But he had a special way of working with kids, at least at where I worked with him down at Beaver Dam. And so that's what I always remember about Larry, is telling me, don't forget the women, don't forget the kids.
Hey guys, this is Chuck Valier. I just happen to have one of these boxes of 6 past lakes. Let's see if I can get it close enough
Yeah,
here.
I have it up on the screen too.
Yeah, but I bought this at the at the auction at Southern Wisconsin chapter about 10 years ago.
Phil, when did you buy yours?
Mine was about 5 years ago. I bought it from Mark Reinerson, who had bought it at a TU auction from Larry.
Yeah, I think we got those the same night. He had 2 boxes up for sale for auction.
The other thing never to forget about Larry is that he never said no to TU, whether it was his chapter or the state council, and he helped start chapters in the southern southwestern part of the state. He gave them money so they could send out mailings for their first chapter meetings. He was always there when they needed him, and when we needed a state council treasurer, the job, and he said just unhesitatingly, I've done that for other organizations, and I'll be happy to do it for TU. He did a really nice job, and we were too sick to do it anymore. So I consider him to be one of the people who had just a huge impact to TU in the period.
You're fading out, Duke.
2000. I do that. All right.
Okay.
Let me ask you and other people that like this fly, how you fish it.
I can't hear you if you ask.
Okay. Let me ask. Is that any better?
Yes.
Let me ask how you prefer to fish it, because I've seen it fished a lot of ways.
Well, I'd like to hear from some of the people that knew Larry and fished it with him and how they fish these flies.
You answered the question. I fished with him probably as much as anybody, and he fished it anyway. It depended on how sloppy his particular cast was. He fished it dry. He would pull, he'd fish it dry and then retrieve it and jerks. He'd fish it wet on a swing. Fished it all kinds of ways. It's sort of interesting. There's a Western fly, which I suspect a lot of you folks have seen, called the Rio Grande King or the Rio Grande King Trude.
I have a slide of it.
Oh, you have a slide coming up, John?
Yeah, that's the last slide.
Oh, okay. I'm
With
sorry.
O'Connor's Rio Grande King.
Yeah, because I could never figure out when I came back to Wisconsin a long time ago, here was the Pass Lake. But out west where I'd been fishing, the Rio Grande King had seemingly been around forever. So who knows where.
1960s.
Well, and I talked with Earl Poppy about whether this was a parallel development or what. And there's all kinds of things that are adopted to make up the Rio. 2000 with the idea that I would find the home of the Pass Lake fly in the site of origin. Pass Lake has like a defunct gas station, 2 houses, and nobody there knew anything about a Pass Lake fly or even about fishing. Out west at some point.
Duke, we can't hear you.
See if my mic, is that any better?
That's better.
There.
You can only see my chest, then you can hear me, which is probably good. But I asked him about whether or not it was just a case of parallel development, or maybe somebody saw a fly and brought it home and started to tie it. And he said, oh no, as far as he knew, it was completely original.
Okay, to keep moving on, so we, because I know I'm running out of time.
Okay.
My PowerPoint's already saying 18 minutes.
Okay.
I was told that that Larry got his nickname. This is another thing I want to try to find out more about. The Pass Lake Kid, sometime in the early 1980s, when he was starting to tie the Pass Lake patterns. Can anybody confirm that or tell me?
Well, Sean Parrish in his book, which I think published around maybe in the 90s,
2001.
2001, called him the Pass Lake Kid. And Larry was wearing that Pass Lake Kid shirt then when he.
Duke,
Yeah.
Duke, Sean was a latecomer to that game. In the mid 80s, he was already the kid for us. And I think Phil has collected a bunch of different reference points from Henry Haugley and Berge and myself and other people. But we had started calling him the Pass Lake Kid at that point in time. And then he started with the embroidery on his shirts, the Pass Lake Kid. But that was after he became a real clothes horse. His early on dress was, take a look at his girth now, was a t-shirt that had a Pass Lake fly image on it. It said the Pass Lake Kid. Unfortunately, his belly was quite large and his belly protruded from the bottom of the t-shirt. From the back of the t-shirt, you could see other important parts of Larry. And so that early Pass Lake Kid shirt, we always said it didn't really meet the sartorial splendor test that we expected of a man of his stature. And the next thing you know, he starts showing up in these fancy embroidered fly fishing shirts with the Pass Lake Kid on them. So
one thing you could always count on Larry for was a complaint about any style used to cross a fence. No style design that would let Larry through, and not a full-grown cow. And so it's hard to design them. And we tried all kinds of things, and Larry would always complain it was just impossible to get through. And the problem still hasn't been solved. My girth is more like. Okay, John.
Here's his card. William Hurt sent me this. Have fly rod will travel. It's close to my motto, which was have computer will travel. And it's fly fishing educator, fly tying, casting, on-stream education, custom tying. And the 6 flies that are mounted appear to me, when I look closely at them, they are all dry flies that Larry tied. They all have the Antron wing, and a couple of them look like they're parachute style. So we must have tied the Pass Lake parachute. Mm-hmm. So here, a couple more from Rusty Dunn, Bill Anderson, who really helped me a lot with this. On the left is Larry's Pass Lake dry fly with the Antron wing. On the right's Larry's Pass Lake Hexagena lambada that I used up on the White River. What struck me on this is what the hell is the body? It's not chenille and it's not peacock herl. What is it? What did Larry use for the bodies on these flies? And William Hurt's patterns, it also was the same material. Anybody know?
sometimes he used black poly.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, sometimes black poly. He also tied it with chenille, and I don't recall him dubbing them.
I had a close look at those 2 flies that I photographed right there for John. And it looks to me like it's black poly. It's definitely not dubbing. It's a fiber that's round and round the hook shank. You can see the individual subfibers. It's a yarn of some kind. It's not reflective. I think it's black poly.
And the wings look to be furnace. The hackle, I mean,
Yeah.
Yes, the wings look to be furnace.
Okay, is that really a dry fly hackle on his dry fly, Phil?
It's either a wet fly hackle or a crappy dry fly hackle.
That's what it looks like.
What you have to know, John, about Meyer is that he was one of the cheapest people you'll ever meet. And so hackle accumulated, whatever was available, cheap was there. After he died and we were going through an inventory of his rods and reels and miscellaneous stuff, it had to bring a smile to your face, because with 20 or 30 fly rods, there was probably one or two that any of you online today would like to have. And Larry was a great fisherman in one way. He was persistent and his fly was on the water all the time. But given his profile personally and his left-handed wild casting, he was not a beautiful caster. He was just on the water, and that fly was on the water, and he would have caught fish with an elk hair caddis or 13 other different flies, because the fly was always out there and he could read the water.
Well, to catch fish, you got to have the fly on the water.
That's right.
Okay.
So the final slide. This is O'Connor's Rio Grande Trude. O'Connor Rio Grande Trude was tied by Dan Bailey's fly shop. The fly is from the 1960s. O'Connor was obsessed with this fly. It's the only fly he used. He fished all over the world and all over West. He caught many large trout out West. There's an article on O'Connor and his Rio Grande Trude that was in Fly Tire magazine I found in autumn 2015 called King of His River. And all I want to say is when I saw this fly right away, that's not a Rio Grande Trude. That's a Pass Lake.
That's exactly right.
And all it did is confirm to me, we think a lot of times when I've read about the Pass Lake, that it's great brook trout fly. He's proven it's great brown trout fly. And it's a fly that everybody's got to have in their fly box. With that, I want to thank everybody. I really appreciate all the help. I sincerely appreciate Phil Anderson's help with my emails, phone calls, bugging them, help me with the flies and the history. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, John.
Now I'm going to stop sharing, Duke.
Another thing that's nice about that fly is it's a perfect panfish fly, because with that white wing, if you fish it underwater, when the wing disappears, you might as well just set the hook. And to some extent, it's that way as a trout fly too. But with panfish, when it disappears, just set the hook, even if you haven't seen anything take it. And I tie them with yellow or hot orange or white wings, and they all work fine. So
Could I add that all of these variations that look like a Pass Lake are descended ultimately, I think, from Tom Bosworth in 1820. It's just the coachman, the famous coachman wet fly. He was carriage driver for King George IV. And he was renowned for his skill with a fly rod, and the coachman wet fly was invented by him. It's largely credited.
Great. Well, thank you.
There's a great article on Rusty Dunn about the coachman and the Pass Lake.
Okay. Well, thank you for all the comments. It was good to take a little tour there. Now we're going to move on next to our next tire, who is Sarah Sanford, who's a member of the Caddis chapter and the Laughing Trout tying group in the western suburbs of River Falls, I guess around over Minneapolis, St. Paul way. And Sarah's a fabulous tyer and has demonstrated in a lot of places, and as well as an amazing artisan. So Sarah's going to join us and tie the llama, which is a northeast Wisconsin fly for the most part, but those of you who have some knowledge of the llama and its source will be welcome to chime in here. So Sarah, are you here?
Hello, Sarah.
Not on-
Sarah, you're on mute.
Sarah, if you're on, if you're having trouble with connections,
Uh,
go ahead.
Sarah's on. I can see her here, and it looks like she's tried toggling her mic mute and unmute, but we still can't hear her, but we can see her.
Looks like she's unmuted.
Sarah, one thing to do might be to check the audio on your machine. And once you get that sorted out, just chime in. There you are, or aren't. You may need to reconnect and check your mic and come on board. So, all right.
I think she may have just dropped off trying to reconnect, Duke.
Okay, I hope she will reconnect soon. And so let's do here is let's move on to Tom Meyer. Tom is the one of the stalwart people. Oh, Sarah, are you back on board and unmuted? Still can't hear you. Sarah, we can't hear you. Okay, let's see if we can. It may be that you have more than one type of speaker that you can use, and you need to readjust which speaker you're using.
Which you can do if you go and click the little up arrow by the speaker, the mute, it'll let you pick which speaker you're using, or which microphone you're using, I should say.
We're not getting anything. Okay. I think in order to let Sarah get her mic sorted out, we should jump onto our next segment. Mike, you're the Baconator. We can see you, but we can't hear. So why don't you see if you can get your mic figured out, and get back on and talk. Okay. Okay. Let's move to Tom. Tom Tom is with Central Wisconsin TU, and for the last several years he's been ringmastering Central Wisconsin TU's master's tying class. And out of the 10 years of that class, which was led before him, I think, by John Grimmer, one of our next tyer, he's picked out 10 or a dozen flies from the 150 or so that they've tied over the years. And it's a really well-run class with some marvelous tyers. And so, Tom, are you there? And do you have a...
Yes.
Okay, Tom, you're ready to go.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Duke asked me to talk a little bit about the class and maybe share some of the, flies and the notable, like the top 10 notable tyers and flies that we tied in the class. So a little bit about the class, first of all. It was over 20 years ago, John Grimmer came up with this idea he recognized, there were so many fantastic fly tyers in the state, and he wanted actually to bring them in and learn from them. And he thought it'd be a great thing to do in the dead months of January and February. So he devised this class, and it's limited to 25 members. And what we do is we bring in a guest tyer It's five nights out of the week. I mean, five nights, I mean, total, and 1 day a week. And it's about 3 hours per night. And it's in January and February. Right now, we're doing it at Hen Feathers. And the way it works is,
Can you guys hear us now?
Ah,
Yeah.
there you are.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Tell you what,
Okay. Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
okay, well, let's have Tom do his piece, and then we'll get back to yours, Sarah. Okay. All right, Tom.
Okay, yeah, the way it works is we invite a tire and we pay their expenses and travel expenses that come down. And we also pay for all their expenses for the materials. And they bring enough materials to allow everybody to tie 2 flies with. And they usually have about 3 different patterns. So it's the classroom, it's set up like a classroom, and we meet early and we have dinner together. It's kind of a social event. And then we go up to the banquet hall, and it's set up like a classroom. There's an example of it. The guest tire will have a camera on his vise, and that image will be displayed in the front of the class on a large screen. And he'll start by explaining, maybe his business and the flies and how to fish them. And then he'll start the first fly, and he'll do it step by step, and we all tie along with it. And then after the first fly, we tie one on our own and go through that, like through all 3 flies. And the tires that we bring in are, you're going to recognize and know all of them. This guy was Ben Lubchansky. He's a guide for the Black Earth Angling Company. He's Kyle Zempel's kind of partner, and he's got a fly tying business through Etsy, and also he supplies a lot of the flies to the driftless angler. But anyway, I'm gonna go through my top 10, and the way I picked it out was basically the flies that I like and that I use a lot and that catch fish. If you would take any of the other 25 guys and ask them what their top 10 flies are, it would all be different. So I'm just gonna go through mine, and I will put up the recipes of these flies, but I'm gonna kind of move through it sort of fast. If you want, you can take a screenshot of the recipe. Otherwise, at the end, all these flies, you're gonna recognize them. You've probably tied them. Looking at the group we have tonight, I'm sure you guys have tied all these flies. And if nothing else, there's hundreds of videos on YouTube that you can get it. So I'm just kind of try to move through this here. Now, most of the tires were from Wisconsin, but Dennis Potter happens to be, I think, probably the only guy. We brought him in from Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's a very notable tyer. He writes for Fly Tying Magazine, and these are kind of his signature flies. The Opal Elk and the Opal X Caddis. And the key thing about this fly is the pearl opal tinsel that he ties on the body. And I just love this fly. It's kind of the only caddis pattern that I fish. And it was like 2011 that he did his class with us. And I loved it so much that 2 years ago, I asked Jim Murphy, another a member of the class and a very good fly tyer. I asked him to tie these again. So we did it twice. And the thing about this fly is that I don't, in Wisconsin or in central Wisconsin here, we have a black caddis, in the spring hatch. It's very inconsistent around here, but if you're lucky enough to be on the stream when the caddis are coming off, and it's usually in the afternoon from like 1 till 4 in April. And the black caddis in the spring really doesn't look anything like these patterns, but this is what I use. And, you know, it's very effective. And in fact, sometimes I use both of them. And in doing research for this program, I read Dennis Potter's article about these flies, and he actually recommends that you use the dry fly at the end, and the first fly you use the emerger. The emerger that you can see there is actually a Craig Matthews pattern, and then Dennis just ties the pearl opal tinsel on the body. You can see the zeolon on the for the shuck. That's Craig Matthews fly right there. So you know, it's my go-to fly caddis pattern now, and really that's the only one that I use, and it's just an excellent pattern. I love it. So basic pattern. I'm gonna move on here. I don't have to say too much about this. John Bethke's Pink Squirrel. I think it was 2008. He came in, and guess what he tied? The pink squirrel. And a little story about that is, I mean, you guys probably know him better than me, but I was fishing with my brother down in the Driftless one morning, and we weren't doing too well. And about noon, we stopped in at the fly shop, and there was a fisherman in there with waders on, and you know, and there was nobody from the store. They were in the back or something, and we started talking to him, and I asked him, you know, how'd you do, like fishermen do? And he says, well, I did great. You know, and I said, we haven't really been catching many fish. I said, what were you using? And he says, well, I only use one fly, and that's the pink squirrel. He says, I'm John Bethke, and I developed this pattern. I said, so that's the only fly you use? And he's, yeah, that's the only fly. I said, ever? And he said, ever. That's all I use. So I don't know, but I guess Duke has told me that that's not quite true, that once in a while, if he's out on the river with somebody and there's a hatch, he'll put on a dry fly and fish the hatch. But you know, it's a famous Wisconsin fly. I was with Duke in Montana one time, and there was a famous rod builder that we were talking to, and he heard we were from Wisconsin, and he said, hey, tell me about the pink squirrel. So, I mean, it's known all over the country. Enough said about that, I guess. You all know about that. And then Ross Mueller, he came in, I think, in 2012. Obviously, John covered the past lake, the wet fly, he tied that, and the hex. I'm going to talk about the hex fly, this pattern, a little later on. He also tied the yellow fox streamer, pretty basic streamer, you know, yellow marabou for the tail and the underwing. He uses like a diamond braid on the body, and then fox squirrel overwing for the top. And he weights it and puts a little dubbing in the front, and that's it. But everybody knows Ross Mueller, his famous book. If you haven't read it, it's a great book to read. The libraries all have it. You know, definitely a pretty, you know, well-known Wisconsin fly tire.
Just if anybody's looking for that book, Tudare has the last 50 copies of the 50 original copies of that book that were donated to Tudare by Ross Mueller.
Oh, wow.
If you need one, get in touch with Jeff Hastings.
Okay, Rich Ostoff has done. Not only did he do our master's class, but he comes in and does a lot of programs for us. I don't know if you've read any of his books, but he spent like 20 years out in the West, you know, just, you know, fishing on his own, camping. And there's a guy, I think he's on the program tonight. I won't mention his name, but he came up with a great nickname for him. He calls him the Predator. And, you know, it's not meant as a negative thing, it's a positive thing, but anybody who knows him and fished with him, that's what he is. I mean, he will walk in like 3 miles from the car to fish, you know, one bend where he knows there's a large trout there. You know, he likes to fish this, you know, bugger is kind of one of his signature flies. And, you know, it's not real complicated. It's for the tail, he uses 3 different colored marabou and a little crystal flash. And for the body, it's, you know, dubbing and hackle. And he weights it, but, you know, it's, you know, everybody knows the woolly bugger or the bugger, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's a deadly fly. And that's one of his signature flies. And I love it too. I use it a lot. And especially like if it's rainy or overcast, that kind of a day, a little murky water, you know, very deadly fly. And then the PT midge, you know, there's nothing more simple than that. Anybody who's ever cut open the stomach of a trout will see all these little brown things in there that look like a PT midge. And so, you know, it's no wonder that it catches fish and it's easy to tie. And then another one of his signature flies is the woolly worms. And, you know, it's not a whole lot different than the bugger other than his tails are made with rabbit fur. But, you know, he fishes them the same way. They're weighted and you know, they're just deadly flies. This is my favorite bait pattern. Kyle, who you know, I'm sure, you know, he's Black Earth Angling Company. He fishes the crash. He came in and tied this for us one day, and you know, it's got a lot going on. It's somewhat of a complicated fly, but there's so many things. Let me just move on to the pattern here. The holographic silver flashaboo. You know, I think kind of that's like the key to the fly. But you know, he's got polar chenille in there, and he's got the Sanyo dubbing for the head there, and it's not a weighted fly, but also Sanyo dubbing for the throat there. I mean, it's just got so many attractors that, you know, it's deadly, and like it doesn't really sink, but it'll go down, and you fish it like maybe 6 inches under the water. And if you're fishing from a drift boat or a kayak or something, you can see it. And that's what I like about it. And the movement of it, it's just a deadly fly. And in fact, I've been using it, and some of my buddies that fish steelhead have been using it on tributaries, on the Lake Michigan tributaries for steelhead and big browns in the fall. And, you know, we've caught a lot of big fish on it. There's just something about it. It's just a deadly fly. And if you ever fish with Kyle, he likes using the crease fly during the crash. That's his kind of go-to. But, you know, if things are slowed down, if there's not many crashes around, you know, he'll use this fly, and it's just wonderful for bass. And I've never really used it on a trout stream, but just definitely one of my favorites. This is so simple, so basic. Everybody ties them, but a couple of things about it. You know, the Charlie Pete, who is the former manager of the Tight Lines Fly Shop, he ties this. This is kind of one of his flies that he. And that's the only beetle pattern that I tie now. A couple of things about it. He uses it on a size 15 hook. And it's just like the perfect size for trout and for bluegills. And it's got a little bit of a wide hook gap. And the other key thing about it is the open cell foam. It's softer, it floats a little better. And, you know, sometimes when, you know, for hookups, it's just, you know, the fish bites it and it just is not quite as hard. And it just gives you maybe that, you know, little second to set your hook on it. And so it's kind of one of my favorite easy patterns that I use a lot. Okay, Pat Ehlers, you know, he's been in the fly shop business for what, 34 years. He's a fly designer. He designs flies for Rainy flies. He designs for Renzetti flying tools. He's been up tying with us for like maybe 4 years now. And he's one of the favorites of the class. He doesn't really tie a lot of trout flies. It's either saltwater or bass, northern musky type flies. And they're all his signature flies, and they're all sold, you know, around the country. And you know, he's a pro for sure. One of my favorites is this laser minnow. Again, it's this Senyo's laser dubbing for the head. It's not a weighted fly. And, you know, it just kind of, you know, goes down below the surface a couple of inches. And I've caught trout on that fly, but, you know, it's mainly for bass, and it's kind of a simple tie. I do a lot of fishing and bass fishing with in my kayak, and a couple of friends that have drift boats. My brother's got one of those flycraft boats, and when I'm fishing moving water, I don't like to use weighted flies because it just gets you into trouble if you get hooked up at the bottom. But this Crazy Craw is a deadly crayfish pattern fly, and if you're on one of the rivers that has crayfish in it, what I like to do is if we stop and get out and fish a deep run or something, I like to put this fly on, and you know, it's something about the movement. It's got, you know, those zonker legs, and it's just a deadly fly. And the Grim Reaper, it's getting pretty close to being an actual lure rather than a fly. It's got all kinds of rubber on it, but the Reaper tail is a product that Pat Ehlers invented, and he sells it in all different colors, and it's a synthetic material, but it kind of has a feel to like a hide or leather when you tie it on. It's kind of fun to tie it on to your bass flies once in a while. It sort of has the movement and creates the vibration like a twister tail would. So it's kind of notable, and it's kind of fun. I got them in like white and black, and just for the fun of it, you can tie it on really any fly that you're going to use for bass or northerns or musky or whatever, and you know, and it's just really works pretty cool. Pat is very generous. Whenever he comes up, he brings, you know, products, promotional items, and donates it for fundraisers for us and everything. So he's kind of one of the favorites. Anybody from the Madison area has got to know Jim Bartelt. These are his signature, you know, flies, the Caddis pupas. And the key to this fly is the Krynic metallic ribbon that he uses, and you can't buy it in a fly shop. You have to buy it at like a Joann's fabric store or places like that, hobby shops. And I got another photo. You can't really see it on these photos. I took these photos and they're terrible, but it's, you know, for the dark caddis, for the spring caddis, he uses a mallard green Krynic, and for the summer caddis, it's what is it called? I think copper color. So, but it's kind of a unique product. You can see it a little better in this photo here. A spool of that will be enough for like 10 guys for a lifetime. But it's easy to, maybe 2-3 wraps on the body. I like to tie it in a size 18. And it's kind of my go-to trailing fly. Like one of my best combinations, especially like down in the driftless area, is a pink squirrel and a caddis pupa. And it's deadly for sure, And he's kind of a fun guy. He's tied at a couple different events for us, and he also has done a couple of programs after our chapter meetings. Bob, I didn't know that he was gonna tie this fly tonight, so I'll let him cover that, but just want to say that it's a deadly fly that everybody should have in their box. He'll talk about it some more, I'm sure, but I definitely is one of my favorites. I always got several of them in my box, and it's a great prospecting fly to use for sure. I happen to be fortunate to live in an area that has some fantastic hex fishing, in June. And in fact, the back of my property borders up to the DNR land, and the Pine River runs through it. So I literally can walk out my back door and go hex fishing, but I usually don't. I usually take my truck, but not only the Pine, but there's several rivers within 5 to 10 miles of my house. And so I do a lot of hex fishing. So the hex flies are kind of dear to my heart. But Mike Mercer, he's actually the owner of the Redding fly shop out in Redding, California. And he came up with this pattern that's really been great. And Jeff Troy, who was a member of our class, he tied it, one night several years ago. And the thing about this is, the extended body is also that open cell foam, and it kind of like folds back, and it's soft, and it helps with your hookups. And also, if you look close, he's got wings, so it can represent a spinner and also a dun too. And it's just one of the, there's tons of hex patterns. It's just one of my favorite. It's deadly. And I like white wings though. So when I tie it, I usually tie it with calf tail on the wing, but for sure, it's a fish catcher for sure. And Steve Hauser, he's also a class member. He's a member of the Fox Valley Tech TU, but he one night we brought him in, and he tied this wood duck hex, and it's been one of my favorites too. And it's kind of the same theory as the Mercer hex, where it kind of folds up in the back. So it kind of represents what an actual bug would maybe feel like in a fish's mouth, and it just gives you that little bit of time, maybe, because if it's dark and so maybe you miss the take, and before they open up their mouth and spit it out, it just kind of gives you that little bit of an advantage. And I think this fly pattern, Steve was shown it by his fly fishing mentor, and I'm not really sure who that is, but what's different with Ross Mueller's pattern is Steve puts a little foam in it just to kind of help with the floatability of it. And John Neville has a flex hex pattern also that's the same theory, where it kind of folds up in the back and just helps out with your takes. So that's been another one of my favorites. The tail is wood duck flank feathers, because that's what it is. And you know, it's an extended body, but it's not tied separately. You tie it right to the shank of the hook, and the stem of the feather actually is the extended body, and but it, you know, it folds up. So it's just a very unique, deadly pattern. Okay, there's a guy by the name of Arling Erickson. You know, you may have heard of him, but he's sort of an iconic figure around here. He owned a fly shop in Hoysippy, and he was actually one of the founders of our chapter. He used to fish with another guy by the name of Gene West, who was also passed away. But Gene was a kind of a production fly tyer, and I'm not sure who actually developed the pattern, but their hex pattern was these two guys. They were hog hunters. I mean, come hex time, you know, they'd throw their canoe in their back, and they put their canoes in some of the, you know, mostly in the mill ponds and the surrounding rivers, and they were hunting big fish. And if you look at the hooks on both of these patterns, it's a 9049 mustad salmon hook. And that's what they used. I mean, they were catching, you know, Arling had 2 30-inch browns mounted in his fly shop. So, you know, and when you're fishing at night, if you want to land the fish, you know, you get a 28 or, you know, 28-inch brown on in the river, you know, you better have a decent hook, and you better have about, you know, size 8 or at least, or maybe even size 12, you know, maxima, you know, fly line for a leader, because otherwise you're not going to land him. He's going to wind himself around a log or a branch or whatever. So this is the hook that they used, and their pattern had calf wing, white calf wing, and then a hackle would be in front of it and back of it. So that was their hex fly, and that's the fly that I started using when I started fishing the hex all the time for years. And after Gene died, I had to start tying myself so I could have some flies. But this one on the left is sort of another Wisconsin iconic fly. Doug Hart, the Green Bay Packer, would come down and meet Arling at the fly shop, and they'd go out hex fishing. And so he came up with this just to kind of honor Doug Hart, you know, and tied this actual fly. Ira Geezy tied that fly one night when we had a kind of a special night that celebrated all the Wisconsin flies, and Ira, that was his featured fly. So I don't know if they actually used them and caught fish. They probably did, but I you know, have such a history with that fly that I kind of developed this fly on the right. Now, the one on the right is not a notable fly. It's not a famous fly at all. It's my pattern, but you know, I use that hook, that 9049 mustad, which they don't make anymore, but you can buy a lot of similar, you know, type salmon strong hooks. But I tie it the same way with that Arling and Gene West tied it, with calf's hair and then hackle in front and back. But for the body, I use superfine dubbing with vinyl ribbing around it. So that's just kind of my signature fly, I guess you could say. And why did I put that in there? Because I could. So, and the last one I want to talk about is Tom Poulette, who we lost. He was a beloved member of our chapter. He was actually the founder of the chapter. He had a dental practice in Watoma. Just a fantastic guy. You know, he was my mentor for fly fishing. He was a good friend. He was a kind man. He was just just a wonderful guy. He was sort of a father figure to me. And we decided to have a special night during the master's class, and we kind of honored him and tied all of his favorite flies. Now, he was not much of a tire, but he loved to fish brook trout, and these were his favorite flies. So we had fun telling stories about Tom Paulette and tying those flies one night. And you recognize them all. John Bremer tied the McGinty B pattern, which actually kind of looks like a past lake, doesn't it? And then Jeff Troy, he tied the Fanwing Coachman and the tricolored streamer. And Tom always talked about the partridge and orange too. And he just loved all these flies, and he loved fishing for brook trout. So, well, that's about it. Thanks a lot for listening. If you want to learn more about the Masters Fly class, you can go to our website. There's a little more in it. Like I say, we limit the class to 25, and we usually we give first shot to the people that are in the class the year before. And usually about 17 or 18 of the guys sign up. So we do have some openings. If anybody's interested, get a hold of me, email me, and I'll put you on the list. And also, or if you're interested in being a guest tire too, we're always looking for people to do that. And you can get a hold of me on that too. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody have a question to shoot in by the chat, let us know. Tim Cleveland says the McGinty, Coachman, Partridge, and Orange soft tackle are staple flies for trout, brookies in Nova Scotia, where he grew up.
Yep. Oh, really?
Yep.
He has in your blog. So
I remember. Go ahead, Duke.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I remember seeing those in all of the, heaven help me here, old timers fly boxes when I was 16 or 17, and they were showing off flies while sitting on a bench salmon fishing, but invariably all the fly boxes came out and people were talking and showing their gear.
When I was learning in the early 80s, and I fished in Namakagon, there was an old guy named Leroy Weingarten who used to hang out near Weingarten Road on the Namakagon, and he was in those days he was mostly driving around, but he had a fly box that was kind of like the Wendelberg fly box. You wish you could have taken a picture of it, because I'm sure there were some classics in there. And Leroy passed, and I don't know whatever happened to his fly box. Maybe if Frank Pratt's on here, he might have a guess. But we missed those opportunities. So, all right, let's. Jeff Gettle asks, is there a good substitute for calf tail? Actually, some of the synthetics are pretty good, and they have some good ability to refract light. And of course, John Gribb, Southern Wisconsin TU, ties a caddis with a particular fibers from a particular seat belt. It's called the seat belt caddis, and he's got a range of years for GM cars that you have to go haunt the junkyards for. 2 inches of seat belt.
Hey, Duke, that's Jim Worsby here. That's a bit complicated. Pat Ehlers has a product in his shop. It's called Near Hair, Neer hair, and it comes in about 15 or 20 different colors. And I have found it great for everything from spinner wings, posts, to replacements for past lake, etc. So you might want to check on that.
Snowshoe foot hair is also a good substitute.
Sure. All right. Well, we're through our technical difficulties, and Sarah, are you ready to roll now?
Well, I hope so. I sent a PowerPoint to Jason just in case there were technical difficulties, and here we are. And so I'm going to try and push some buttons here and bring up the PowerPoint on my screen, and I'm supposed to be sharing screen here. So we'll just see what happens, right?
Sarah, Jason?
Sarah, oh, go ahead, Duke.
Ooh,
Can you still hear?
I can hear you,
Yeah.
Sarah. There's a green share screen down in the bottom. There should be. Click that and it'll give you an option which screen it is you want to share. So have your PowerPoint open and then hit share screen and it'll find, and then you'll find which screen you want.
I was going to just put it on from the email. I emailed it to myself because I have it on my laptop, but I don't have it on my iPad. This is way too long a story for my technical ineptitude as it pertains to Zoom meetings, but
Sarah, I tell you what we will do is I will bring it up on my computer and just tell me when to advance.
Very helpful.
Just tell me when to advance and I will do so.
Okay.
This a little bit about this fly. This is another Miles Tourtelot fly, if I understand correctly. Miles was a member of the Menominee Nation and tied flies and fished for big fish up in northeastern Wisconsin and sold them through fly shops in Shawano and other places in the area. He's developed some others, but this is the one that's attributed to him most often. It's been said also that some of those flies that were used in the northeastern part of the state came in with the folks who came in to log, who came in from Canada and the northeastern US. So there we are. I don't know much more than that.
Well, he knows more than me. He asked me to tie this fly, which I had never seen. And furthermore, you can go ahead and advance one, Jason. Furthermore, I did not have the materials for this fly. And I tied my first llama today. So it's very helpful. It's very, very helpful that Duke was able to provide at least that little bit of history for the fly. So as you can see on my very artistic recipe card there, you use a long streamer hook, and the streamer hook that was called for in the recipe from Wisconsin fly fishing wasn't one that they happened to have at Bob Mitchell's. And so I came home with some Daiichi 2220s in a size 6. And I'm using black thread, soft grizzly hackle fibers for the tail, some flat silver tinsel for a rib. The body is 4 strands of red floss. And there's a footnote on that because you can use a lot of different colors. It's just not necessarily the llama. You can use woodchuck. And boy, I didn't know that woodchucks had such nice fur. And now that I know, no woodchuck is safe. So maybe I won't swerve on the road when I pass a woodchuck. The collar is also some of that grizzly hackle. It's a soft hackle. And then the head is black thread with painted eyes, or you could use a bead. But I think I kind of agree with one of your previous presenters in that I think a weighted streamer can lead to some troubles with catching a lot of rocks and catching a lot of the bottom. So if you want to get it down, besides the water that just collects in there, maybe you want to put some split shot, some non-lead shot on the line itself, on your tippet. You can go ahead, Jason. I have some pictures here. These are the materials that I picked up at Bob Mitchell's. And you'll see there that the woodchuck is one of those, the Daiichi hook. I had some hackle in my woolly bugger packet of hackle, and I'm using that. I think maybe hen hackle would be a good thing for this fly, but I didn't have any long hen hackle. I am a fan of black fingernail polish. If you've got a fly that you're tying with a black thread head, if you're tempted to put a black bead on there, if you're tempted to paint little eyes on your fly, fingernail polish is a wonderful thing to do it with. And I go to the Target or Walgreens and I get the cheapest kind of black fingernail polish I can find. And you would be surprised at how many black fingernail polishes there are. I mean, as if you're not a typical consumer of fingernail polish, take my word for it, you'll find black. For very small flies, it's helpful to take the brush from your fingernail polish and cut it off at an angle to make it a chisel point, so you can have very accurate application of that head polish on there. So you'll also see some floss on that little photo. You'll see the thread that I'm using, and you'll see the fairly wide tinsel that I've got going there too. Okay, Jason. I decided on the first couple of flies that I tied this afternoon practicing for this little event that the technique that lent itself to the smoothest body and got my stuff added in there with the most secure tie-in was to add the tinsel and the floss not far behind the head. You can see there's a bare space on the hook there behind the head. That's about, well, it's a little bit less than a hook gap in length behind the head there. But I added those materials on the top of the hook and I tied them down as smoothly as I could. Okay, Jason. There are 3 steps in tying flies, all flies. There are 3 steps. That's all you do. You tie on, you add materials, and you tie off. That's all there is to it. So every fly is a simple fly. You're tying on, you're adding materials, and you're tying off. Different materials require different finesse to add them, to advance them, and what have you. But you get good at the tying on, the adding materials, and the tying off, and those basics will hold you for every kind of fly you want to tie. I learned a little trick about using floss. It's an unruly type of material. You're prone to catching it with your little hangnails. If your manicure is not great, you're going to catch those little fibers. If your skin is a little bit winter dry, as it is up here in the frozen north, you're going to catch little pieces of that. So you wrap that on slowly and carefully. I go back and forth with the floss several times, and I tie it off up near the front of the fly. And I take what's called a bone folder. It is a little knife-looking thing made out of bone. That's that white thing you see that in those photographs. And I use that to smooth the floss. It moves those little fibers back and forth so that they lay a little bit more flat. And you can see on the blue fly that that came out pretty well. Go ahead, Jason. I didn't yet talk about the tail, and so I'm going to have to skip back there, verbally at least. I don't need to go back in the pictures. The recipe calls for tails made of the self-same grizzly hackle fibers. And if you're careful with your little feather, you can pull off those fibers from the end of the feather that you're going to use for a hackle later on. And some of those will be really fluffy, fuzzy little fibers, and some of those will be straighter fibers. And can gather those together and tie those on at the back of the hook. And then you advance your floss after that. You advance your ribbing after that. Where you get a bone folder, craft stores, you can get bone folders at book binding stores. There are various arts that use bone folders. And I'm a crafty little gal, so I have a bone folder. So I made use of it. Advancing that tinsel is a bit of a doing. Some of us have those lovely Renzetti rotary vices, and you can just set your bobbin on the little bobbin holder, and you just rotate your whole vice head and hold on to both the floss and tie that down after you get to the front, and you can advance your tinsel in the same way. And you're going to try to make even turns of your tinsel so that you see about the same amount of floss in between the stripes of tinsel in each segment. I think you can cheat a little bit as you get toward the middle and front of the fly. If it's fatter there, I think it's okay for the ribbing to be a little bit further apart. Any questions about that so far? Okay, so I see in this photograph, it's a little bit of a sparse measure of hair, in my opinion. As experienced as I am with the llama fly, in my one day of experience, I found that I continued to add more and more hair, and it measured so against the shank of the hook at the tie-in point so that it would extend to about the place where it's even with the tips of the tailing. And then I tied that down, and then I added more. And then probably I added a little bit more until I got what made me happy. After tying down that clump of hair, those several clumps of hair, I cut the butts off at an angle so that would help me to get a taper eventually as we go toward the head. You can advance, Jason. Jason. Oh, too many. Okay. So once you've got that hair tied in, I have just a couple of little pointers here for you in adding this particular material. You're going to be adding some of that grizzly hackle. And because I decided to go with blue floss on the third or fourth of these flies that I tied today with a copper rib, I thought that looked nice. I actually had some grizzly hackle in kind of a cinnamon brown color, and adding hackle for just about any fly, it's helpful to leave just a few little snipped barbs there at the front. And then I have left kind of a long point on that hackle stem so that I can fold it back again. Those little tiny barbs just give the thread a little bit extra bite in there. It doesn't slide out, theoretically, it doesn't slide out quite as easily. So you can go one ahead again, Jason. And I get that tied in. I put a few wraps down over the stem of that hackle, and then I tie a few more wraps of thread over that excess stem. And right at the back of those black thread wraps that you see, I cut off the end of the stem and try and wrap down smoothly from the tie-in point of the hackle up to the eye of the hook. And you can go ahead one more time, I think. Now we're getting to the end of the fly. I probably used 7 or 8 wraps of hackle that I liked the look of, and that was that cinnamon and black grizzly hackle. It was the only one I had that I thought was actually the right length. The plain grizzly hackle on the red and silver fly that I tied it, I think came in a little bit short, and I actually used less of it just because I didn't like the look of it. Maybe it was 4 or 5 turns of hackle. And you pull back those hackle fibers as you wrap that hackle in, pull it back. Some people fold feathers in half so that the hackle is naturally swept back, and I think that's just simply easier when you're working with a softer hackle like a hen hackle. It's more difficult with something a little stiffer like what I have in these photographs. So I got as many turns of hackle on there as I wanted. And here's another little pro tip that probably doesn't take anybody very long to learn for themselves, but I feel like I need to state the obvious here. When you're cutting off stuff that you don't want on your fly, don't point your scissors at stuff that you do want on your fly. Here you see me holding the thread back away from the eye of the hook. I'm holding the thread back, and I'm also pinching the hackle fibers that I do want away from the front of the hook. And my scissors is aimed at that one errant little fiber that's sticking out from the front of the eye there, and I'm about to snip that off. Once I'm happy with how much gets snipped off, maybe there are little bumps here and there in the head, and I ameliorate bumps in the head of the fly slightly differently than in the body of the fly. It's a matter of wrapping them down with your tying thread, and then you can also cover up a few illnesses with your fly with some coats of that black fingernail polish. So let's see what else we've got here. Jason, have I got another slide in there. So like I said, I thought the blue and copper was kind of nice for the body. And I'd say that's about my third llama fly ever. In light of the fact that I don't have lots of great history, I don't have lots of great pictures to show you, I thought maybe I'd just show you some slides and then I would demonstrate tying the fly. But I want to tell you, Duke doesn't know this. He didn't know this before he asked me to tie this fly for you. I've tied a few things at fly shows, and there was a show in Wisconsin, no, a show near Chicago, one of Tom's Great Waters shows in Chicago, and he asked me to drive on down to Chicago in the wee hours of the morning so that I could tie flies at his show. And the rumor is that there was an explosion at my tying desk, and I want to refute that right now. There was not an explosion caught on camera as I was demonstrating a fly I had just invented. That didn't happen. There was a little fire. There were a few flames. I didn't light the whole fly on fire, but there was singeing and a rather unpleasant smell. So I am having second thoughts about demonstrating the tying of this fly. We can go away from the share screen there, Jason, and I am just going to show a couple of little things that I do. I don't know if I've run out of time here yet, and if you all have interest in any of this stuff here, but make hand signs at me, Duke, or something if you want me to shut up.
Let's ask some of our friends that are from particularly the central or northeastern part of the state that are aficionados of the llama, where and how they like to fish it.
Crickets.
Mm-hmm.
Duke, I've tied that fly, and I have it on WI Fly Fisher and used it several times on the Namakagon. And you fish it like a streamer across and down, and it works very effectively. My favorite colors are the red with silver or the yellow with silver tinsel with painted eyes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Sarah, thank you. That was a fun demonstration to watch. You can see everybody, Sarah's just a great tyer, and she's really a good teacher too. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Our next tyer is John Gremmer, who is not a killer of TU and a good teacher, but and a good leader, but he's just an amazing tyer with a lot of appreciation for this fly tying culture that we're celebrating. And John's going to talk with us about the Hornburg special. John, have at
Yes,
it.
I am. Let me just bring up my screen here. And this is the one I want. And this is what I want to do. The Hornburg actually is my favorite streamer. And I first started using it down in southwest Wisconsin. And the moment of epiphany was I was fishing the trico hatch, and I wasn't doing anything, and then it kind of petered out. So I looked in my fly box, and the Hornburg was there, and I had never tried it. I had a couple of them, so I tied it on, pitched it across the stream, and it hit a rock, bounced in the air back towards the stream, and a fish jumped up out of the water and grabbed it out of the air. And I thought, you know, maybe there's something to this fly. So that's the story how I got started with it. The reason I like it in southwest Wisconsin is because it doesn't go down to the bottom. And some of those shallow streams, you can pitch it out there. It'll sit on the top for a little while. You could just pull it under. And so that's why I like it. So over the years, I've done quite a bit of photography on fly fishing. and experimented with waterproof cameras. Some I learned weren't waterproof. But here's a picture of one with a hornberg in it. After you fish a hornberg a little while, a fresh one, it looks pretty beat up. And I'll show you, you can see that little silver thing coming out of there. That's the round tinsel. And I know there's a way to prevent that. Here's another hornberg and another trout. So I think all these pictures were taken in Southwest Wisconsin. I haven't really fished it in a lot of other areas. In Arkansas, I've fished it. Here's some right here that I tied up this last week, so I would have a few. Now, a little bit about the hornberg special, a little bit of the history. Most of you have probably tied a hornberg, fished a hornberg, know something about Frank Hornberg. I was surprised that he was born in 1882, and he lived a long time. In 1966, he died. But Hornberg actually is about 100 years old. He developed in the 1920s. And he was one of the first, I think, the first game warden in Portage County. And he liked the fish, and he liked the fly fish. And he developed this fly. And then the Weber Company in Stevens Point, the tackle company that tied flies and sold flies, helped him develop it. And they put it in one of their catalogs, and then it became very popular on the East Coast and then around the world. So I would argue that the Hornberg is probably Wisconsin's most famous fly. Now, Dahlberg may argue, and other people may argue, but seems like people know it all around the world. So he didn't just call it the Hornberg, it was called the Hornberg Special. And for people in TU, Frank led rehabilitation trips to a lot of streams before TU was even born, back in the 30s and 40s. At least that's what it said on the internet where I read. Of course, it also said that Trump won the election. So I don't know if you can always believe what's on the internet. Now, I can say that because if people are angry out there, they can't get at me through my screen, okay?
Good for you.
So anyway, the Weber Tackle Company was one of 5 commercial fly tying businesses in Stevens Point. And somebody mentioned Gene West a while back. Gene went there and bought a barrel of jungle cock. Okay, he had a barrel of jungle cock in his basement, and then the Watoma flood happened, and everything that he had in his basement got flooded, all the jungle cock, everything. Of course, it all molded and was ruined. Now here, I got this out of a book that was, or a fly book that was published in 1970. And it was the original pattern that I first started using. And then through the years, like all these flies, you start substituting things in, you find some modern things that work better. But the old Mustad 9672 streamer hook, and you can use black or brown thread, a flat silver tinsel. I use the Mylar. If you got the metal stuff, you can use that. Now, for the wings, use a pair of mallard or some other duck flank feathers. Teal work pretty good.
Wood duck works.
Yeah, wood duck works real nice. I think I'm using wood duck in what I'm going to demonstrate here. And then the jungle cock. Actually, you can go on eBay, and I don't know, I saw jungle cock patches there, pretty big ones for $20, $30. And but I think if you want the real bright gold ones, you got to go looking in other places. to find them. A nice, expensive jungle cock neck would probably last you a lifetime unless you're a commercial tire with some nice big fat nails. So if anybody has one, I would like another one. You can send it to me if you got one. And by the way, if anybody wants this PowerPoint that I'm showing here, I can send you a PDF of it. So let's go on to this. These are some of the materials. You know, you can use silver tinsel or round tinsel or gold. You can use some regular metal tinsel, regular tinsel, mylar. I'm using brown thread. You can use black thread. And here are the old hooks. Now, this is not the way you want to lay down thread right there. Okay, probably want a little bit more even. And I was probably having a senior moment when I was tying this on, but that's okay. The fish don't mind, and it's all going to be covered up anyway. So here I got my flat tinsel. I got my round tinsel tied in first. And then I wrap the tinsel and counter wrap the round tinsel. Leave about a quarter of the hook from the eye back uncovered. Now, instead of for the underwing, the original patterns call for yellow bucktail, right, or hackle, yellow hackle, or whatever that you can find that's yellow. I've started using calf tail. You could use. I like the rabbit hair. I think it soaks up a little water.
That's for me.
Can't get at me through the screen here. But anyway, I love it. I think it helps the fly sink a little farther. And it really, when the wings get wet, that yellow really shines through, which I think is a good feature. So here I've got some tied in, probably more than some people will put in. Here are my flank feathers. I think this is from a wood duck. Am I right or am I wrong?
That's a mallard.
Okay. I got mixed boxes of these things, so it's a duck feather, okay? And here's how you tie them on, about this size. You don't want to go too far past the end of the hook. And now you can see the yellow bleeding through there already. This one, jungle cock, kind of picked over. I used most of the big ones in the middle for tying Rangeley Lake flies. I still have some good ones along the bottom and some good ones along the top. And a lot of split ones on the end. So you tie in the jungle cock cheeks. And somebody commented before that that you don't catch any more fish with that eye on. That could be true, but it feels a lot better to be fishing the authentic thing.
Oh, blind hornbirds because they don't have any eyes.
So I got some hackle here that I'm going to tie in next for the collar. I think the stiffer the barbs, the better on this. They used to talk about the sonic boom that you would get under water with a fly with a stiff collar. And there might be something to that. So want to tie in a stiff collar. Mm-hmm. And this is a picture that I stole out of a book someplace, but it is the hornbird. So I know everybody's kind of familiar with the hornbird, but I really think that should give it a try this summer.
John, some people take a little bit of head cement and bring those tail end of the wing fibers together.
Yes.
You do that? Have you tried that?
Well, I showed you that first picture with the tips back. The water does that. After about the third cast, everything is swept back. But yes, they used to do that all the time. Take a little head cement and come. I think that made them sell better. They looked more like a minnow, like with that fusiform shape that you get with a minnow.
Maybe you can help me with this. I've been told by a biologist that Hornberg tied this originally to imitate a larger caddis that appears at a certain time of the summer on some central Wisconsin streams, and it flutters along the top. And that's why he put a dry fly hackle on it, so that he could flutter it. Is that any?
Yeah.
Is there any?
People, you can fish this dry. You could probably make it into a size 12 or 14 and flip it out there and skate it or whatever you want it to do. That's true. Oh, I wanted to mention too, everybody knows or knew Bob Hunt. And I'm not telling any stories out of school, but Bob was extremely thrifty. And so I don't think he owned a jungle cock. So when he tied his Hornberg, of course, he also knew everything about fish and what they were going to bite. But he didn't use the jungle cock. I don't even think he put a collar on it. Did he, Duke?
I don't think so.
No, it was, and he did real well with it. But he called it the Huntberg.
He didn't even sweep back the collar as a wet. He just tied it without a collar.
Huh.
Yep. And
I gotta tell a story about Bob, and then I'm gonna get off the stage here. But Bob and I were going up to the Brule fishing, and I was driving, and we go across a bridge, and he goes wild. Stop the car! Stop the car! He gets out, and I don't know what he's doing, and he runs back, and I can't see what he's doing. And he comes back into the car about 15 minutes later with a beaver skin, bloody beaver skin. And about 2 months later, I get a couple patches in the mail of the beaver skin. But Bob was a very interesting guy and has a great legacy here in Wisconsin. And I am off.
Okay. Anybody? John, thanks for a great demonstration and story. Does anybody have any questions or additions to what John shared with us?
I got a comment on Hornberg. I tie a lady Hornberg. I use pink squirrel tail in a metal and pink hackle, and I call it the lady Hornberg. And brook trout seem to like white and pink, and it's worked real well for me and brook trout.
I tie it with a red underwing, and I like to alternate a yellow or red underwing, and sometimes one works and sometimes the other one does. And years ago, when I was on Moosehead Lake in Maine, I went into the fly shop up there. Danny Legere's is a third or fourth generation Maine guide, and he told me that I asked him about the Hornberg, and he said, no Maine guide would ever go out with a client without a whole box of different Hornbergs in different sizes, black, red, green, yellow, traditional, and different sizes, because your client will not think that you're a legitimate guide if you don't have a box of Hornbergs. And
Boy.
so, of course, they didn't give you any credit for it having come from Wisconsin, but it was a good story.
You know, I've tried those things with tying a red head on them, and that always seems to work so well. From the Nemacoggin and the Brule and Shell Creek up there in Minong, that red head really seems to turn them on.
Particularly brook trout, Al?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good idea.
John, somebody asked, what size do you favor?
I size 8 and sometimes 10. I like them kind of big.
And when I fish a huntberg, I'll put a little non-toxic wire on the shank just to get it down a little bit farther and fish it more like a minnow rather than a wet dry fly. But it's a great fly. Well, thank you, John.
My pleasure.
Can you unshare there, John?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, I can.
thank you.
If I can just find my.
It's up top.
I know. I can't find my cursor.
Just cuss a little bit.
Our next presenter probably
I'll touch it. I don't have a touch screen yet.
our next presenter.
Oh, okay, I got an idea.
Minimize it. Yeah.
There we go.
Hey, thanks again, John.
Yeah.
Our next tyer probably ties more flies in a year than your chapter does. And Bob Haase teaches and provides flies for events and leads the TU effort at Point X every year with hundreds and hundreds of kids tying their first fly. And he's just the absolute energizer buddy of fly tyers in this state. And Bob, if you haven't run across it, Bob has a really nice book of tying tips and patterns that will, I guarantee you that there isn't one among us who's on here that wouldn't get something out of his little book. So look it up. Bob can probably tell you where to find it. So from Fond du Lac, Bob is going to tell us about a fly that he developed and we all ought to be tying. Bob?
Okay. How do I get on here? Am I on? No.
You're on.
Here we go.
Go ahead.
Come on. You should be on.
Is that a PowerPoint?
No, it's not. It's going to be live.
Well, good. We got you.
It was working before. Let me try one thing here. I've got to get back into Zoom. No, not this again. Glasses.
You can see you, Bob.
You can.
Yeah.
Can you see me?
You're in the fly eye view with 25.
Okay. Okay, but I need to come down here and get into what it calls settings. Somebody help me get into settings.
Ace?
Yeah. Let's see.
I'm not sure what you're trying to do, Bob. So
I'm trying to change to get Black Magic.
Oh, so share your screen. So hit the share screen and then choose that application. And you have to have it open to be able to do it.
Right. Okay. Let me get back in there. Come on.
If anybody has a 15-year-old that can augment our IT staff,
Or a grandchild.
Yeah.
It won't let me get back in is what it's not doing. There we go. That should get me back in. I go down to video and go up here to Black Magic Design, and it should work, but it doesn't. I actually got to get into settings. If somebody's got a good story while I do this, because it won't share. I hit share screen. No, share.
There you go, I think.
Nope.
So when you share screen,
if I
you're
can
going to
get
want
back
to pick the
into-
app that you want to share.
I did, but it's not working. And what I got to do is go back into Zoom, and I got to get back to try it again. I'm going to come right back in, and there's a setting or video illustration. Okay. This is not working. Okay, I try it one more time. It's not letting me back in is what it's not doing.
What do you mean by that back in?
I'm out of, I'm no longer in Zoom.
Yeah, you are.
Well,
I am.
we see you, so you're.
Okay, settings. Somehow it's not letting me back in here.
You know, it's just amazing to me if they would only make these things with rotary dials on them.
Yeah,
Figure out
that might help.
you know, it would be so much
Bob, do you
easier.
have a PowerPoint or what are you trying to do?
I'm going to be live. I'm going to be live.
Somebody said
Um,
Alt S.
Alt S. I'm reloading. Come on.
Bob, do you have a camera?
Yes, I got three cameras.
Then I do this too. Go into share screen on your regular Zoom setting, and you should get, if the camera's on, you should see a picture or two to choose from what you want to do. Click on that, and then down at the bottom right, you'll see share.
I somehow got booted out. I got booted out of Zoom, and I'm going back in. And I should be back in. I'm back in, but I had this problem before. Yeah. Oh, this is going to be. There's a setting where it says Zoom meetings. I go back.
Bob, did you try the Alt S?
I'll try it again. Alt S. Nothing. I've got to get back into, there's a thing that says settings for Zoom. And in that settings, I've got to change Black Magic for my view. And it's not letting me do it. I'm going to go back. I don't know why, because I get. Security.
If it won't interfere with the IT deliberations, does anybody have some ideas for future libations and creations that we might want to have talk with Jason about building into the schedule for next year?
I'll just share the next two are Scott Grady's going to talk about kind of how to care for your rods, and then he's going to do a short how to build a bamboo rod thing. That's 2 weeks. And then Scott Stewart is going to do Euro nymphing. He's going to tie a couple of Euro nymphs, and he's going to show a leader as well, how he ties a leader. And then the last one would be March 20th, I believe, which is totally open right now. If somebody has an idea they really want to do, we'll do that. Otherwise, I was thinking about just kind of having an open one and just seeing how that goes without a theme. Just sort of a get together and a reason to enjoy each other's company.
You know, I just got a very interesting book called Flowers and Flies that I got online. Someone put it up, must have been one of our group, about what flowers are blooming and what flies are out at the same time. Because, you know, when the trillium are blooming, the green drakes or whatever are on the water. What an interesting book, and what a wonderful sort of collaboration, or what do I want to, you know, between what's out there and what's out there. It was just a fascinating book to read. That would be very interesting to talk about, you know, seasonal eruptions of both flowers and flies. I found it fascinating.
Sulfurs and lilacs. Yep, May apples and the black caddis.
For some reason, I cannot get on.
Okay.
And everything's hooked up right. I'm on Black Magic Design. And so I think you're SOL and I'm SOL.
Let's talk about a plan B, Bob.
Yeah.
You have the materials there, and you want to walk us through an emu bugger?
Let me try one more thing. Video. I don't know why it's not working, but
Bob, did you try going out and getting back in?
I've been in and out 5 times now.
Oh, okay.
And what's happened, I'm using a Black Magic Design switcher. I got a 4-camera switcher. And I've got it on my video. I've got a list Black Magic, which I've done. And in my settings, I got a list Black Magic Design, and that's what I've done. And it still won't let me in for some reason. Go back here again. Video, Black Magic Design, so I'm in there.
Well, he wants to show it.
Yeah, I know.
Integrated webcam, let's see if that works. Is that working? No. That's not working either.
We see you a little differently, though.
That was a better view.
Yeah. Now let's try one more thing here.
Well, that's debatable.
You're my
Video.
friends, Bob. Believe it or not.
Okay, that might be it now. Nope, still not. I'm absolutely, it's worked every time we've tried it this week. Murphy still,
Can you
Murphy
just
still
put
lives.
your laptop camera closer to your device and just talk?
I'm not using a laptop camera and, whoops. Okay, video. Mirror my video.
Oh,
Well,
while he's doing that, how many flies do people have tied tonight?
Ivan, as a ringmaster, 1.
I was going to set up to tie, and my tying bench is in the same den area as where my 2 children are on the computers playing video games, and I have retreated to the basement.
I just got my 8th Wendelberg scud tied.
Good for you. I got a lot of caddises tied today during the state council meeting. So that was good.
Now I got 6 nymphs tied after the state council meeting and before this. Paragons mainly.
Tom Lager, what are you tying?
I'm just enjoying the conversation.
Oh.
I've tied up over the past couple of weeks, I've tied up a whole mess of different variations on caddis. I call them granum. Other people call them black caddis. This is in preparation, our Fox Valley chapter meeting coming up on the 18th of February. It's going to be all about granum, or AKA black caddis of Wisconsin. The focus is going to be on bugs, and there'll be a little, I'll show a couple of, I think 7 different designs of flies that correspond to different behaviors of
Am I on now?
Yeah,
I think I might have got it. I don't know how, but you see me now.
we're still stuck with you, Bob.
We're still stuck with you. Well, let's
Oh,
No, there it's different.
it was full screen.
okay, no, then it's not working.
Okay, so Tom, you're back.
Okay, our chapter meeting on the 18th of February is going to focus on the black caddis or the brachycentrus. It's also called the granum caddis. And the focus is going to be on understanding the bugs and translating their behaviors
Bob, you
into
got it.
fishing practices.
I think he's got it.
Yep.
Okay, I'm out.
We're back to Bob, to live Bob.
Okay, finally, that's what the emu bugger looks like.
Eddie, come on, Edmund.
And the emu bugger is probably the youngest of the old flies we've got tonight. It's not that, I'm gonna move out a little wider here.
Come on.
I started this about 25, a little over 25 years ago. And I'll switch back to this. About 25 years ago, I received some feathers from my sister. She bought them on eBay and they're emu feathers. And I was wondering what to use them for. And I used them for legs for nymphs. And then I was tying some buggers and I thought this looked interesting. And the difference in that is that if you get a tighter shot here, most hackle will be just a single barb coming up like this.
Bob, can I interrupt you a minute? I think if people go to speaker view instead of gallery view, it'll give you the full screen. I can see the full screen, but without that, I couldn't.
Okay.
So people have to do that individually.
I'm in speaker view.
Okay. Well, and we may need to get to speaker's view too. But anyway, now
let me try this. I've tried gallery.
No, don't you do anything. But
you're fine, Bob. So what Tom is talking about for everyone is up top. There's a button that says View, and if you pick Speaker View, you'll see a close up of whoever's speaking.
Exactly. You don't have to do anything, Bob. Please don't.
Okay.
We have to
Tom,
do it.
you're right.
Okay, now we can see you, Bob.
Sorry for the interruption.
And I've got these symbols on here, which I shouldn't have, but at least you got the picture. You can see my fly, right?
Yes.
Okay. If you look at the hackle, a normal hackle has just straight barbs. If you take a emu feather, they have, every barb is like a separate feather. There's little fibers coming off each barb on an emu feather. And it adds a little more motion, I think, to the fly. And when I tie a fly, I like to get as much motion as I can out of the fly. So what I'm going to do is start tying a fly, and I generally tie it in a size 10. And I generally use either fluorescent pink or chartreuse or fluorescent orange as a collar. The first time I tied these was the one that was shown earlier from Tom. And I'm going to make quite a few wraps behind the head here. I want to create a bump there. I'm using a 3/16 bead on this. I use 5/32 and 3/16, and I tie a pretty good wrapping of thread back here. It acts as kind of a bump because this a heavier bead can actually work itself back. Now wrap the thread back to about the bend of the hook, and I'll take a wild turkey feather. And if I go back, can you see that? Yeah. And what I do with this wild turkey feather is if I take with my hand like this, I will lay the feather in it, and then I'll take and bring both the thumb and forefinger down and wrap the fibers down. I'll take it from the top and I'll turn it around. And by doing that, I end up with a clump that looks like this. So if you got just turkey body feathers, you can use your emu, your that way. Or if you want to know somebody's got wild turkey, easier way is just take the marabou off the body of the wild turkey. Most people look for the colorful feathers, and I like these little pieces of marabou with under feathers. And I'll accomplish just by bringing this back, and I'll measure about the hook shank, and I'll tie it in about that length. I'll spin my thread to sharpen it so I get a little more bite. I'm constantly sharpening or flattening my thread to have it lay flat or have it bite into the material. cut the excess off. I'll wrap that down. And then I'll take an emu feather. And on those that I've got are about 3/8 of an inch. Go back here. They're about 3/8 of an inch across. It's about the width that I usually get all sizes coming off an emu. So I'll tie that in and sharpen my thread a little bit. When I do that, if you sharpen your thread as you're tying this in, it'll be in tight. It's not going to pull out. And then for the body, most people, when they do their buggers, they will generally do chenille. And what I use is dubbing. And I make my own dubbing. It's a mixture of squirrel, and I mix gray squirrel, fox squirrel together. Just use gray squirrel if that's all you got. And then I blend with that the following colors of crystal flower, of ice dubbing. And I use olive, caddis green, chartreuse, steely blue, purple, pink, and emerald green, all mixed together with squirrel. The proportions are the same for all equal portions of ice dubbing, and it should be about 1/4 to 1/5 squirrel and the rest ice dubbing. And you end up with this. I also take, I get back here, and I don't use dubbing wax, but I use water moisture. I used to lick my fingers, but then I use roadkill squirrel. So I just go to use wet my fingers, just fits in a Renzetti block. So it works real nice. And then I'm just going to take and moisten my fingers. And I'll back to showing a better view of that. And I find that by using dubbing, I can pick this dubbing out and I get all those iridescent colors coming out of the body. And I put a pretty good noodle on there of dubbing.
Boy, these guys are just crazy.
Like this.
You can mute that, you know.
I started out with chenille, and I got to tell you that one of the first people to really test my fly was Bob Hunt. And Bob took it down to Colorado, and he had some friends down there that had a private pond. And they called and told him that they thought they lost all the fish in the pond because they couldn't catch any rainbows. They thought they were all gone, probably oxygen depletion or got otters in there. So Bob went down and he put an emu bugger on. He caught one fish after another, and they all got excited. Oh, they're in here. They're still in here. Yeah, look at that. Bob came back and says, don't tell anybody about that fly, but it saved my reputation. So after I've got it, the dubbing on there, I'll take a Velcro on a popsicle stick and I'll pick that dubbing out. And if it's a little too long, I might just cut a little off, but you should be able to see how shaggy that dubbing is. And then I'm going to take the emu feather and I'm going to wrap it starting right at the separation between the tail and the dubbing, make one wrap. And I'm going to leave about an 1/8 inch spacing in between each wrap. Up to the head. Now, I hope everybody can see this, and I'll do it a couple of times if necessary. But most people, when they tie your hackle down, will bring the thread over the top of the hackle and just tie it down with one wrap over the hackle. What I do is something a little different. I will wrap my thread completely around the feather. So I've got my thread completely around the feather, and then I bring both up together, and it's in there. If you, I can let me go back to this. If my finger was hackle and I bring the thread over the top, the hackle can slide back and forth. If I wrap a noose around it, it can't move. So by wrapping the thread around the hackle or hackle around the thread, it's in there. It's not going to go back and forth. So it makes a lot stronger tie. I'm going to tie the hackle off. I'm going to bring my fingers and hold it back. And I'm going to just make a collar. And I want that collar to show. And I'll build that up so it's about not quite an 1/8 of an inch wide. And get back on a tighter shot here. And do my whip finish. And generally, if you go behind a bead or in foam, it compresses in one area. If you've got an area like that, a whip finish is not to tie. A series of half hitches are better because in the process of doing that, one strand off and the whole thing can come undone. So what I do, and if you can see it with this, it's not going to work, but I will actually take and make a different type of whip finish where I actually pull the bobbin right through the last loop. But this is basically the emu bugger. Any questions?
Bob, have you used a coral chenille, a pink chenille? Similar?
I have.
And
I have used that. Let's see if I can get back up here a little tighter. I have, but the dubbing gives that iridescent in the body. When it gets wet, this iridescent kind of shows through. I use a wild turkey for the tail in most instances. It turns black in the water, and that particular combination. The bead I've got on here is a multi-hued bead. I get those from Wholesale Fly Company. And if I don't use that, I generally use either a gold or I use either a chartreuse or pink head on them. And if I can go back to show that, I'm going to show. One thing I might show every time I do a tying demonstration, I like to show one tip. And a tip I've got is with my tying station, my counter is 27 inches high. And if you get a table that's 30 inches high and it brings your arms up too high, if you were to take it just sitting right now and you're to have your hands just kind of tucked by your side and up just a little bit, there's no stress. But if you come up higher, you'll feel, the higher you go, you'll feel some stress or tension in your joints. If you reach out, you'll also feel it in your shoulders. There's times I'll tie 300 or 400 flies a week. If you're tying just a dozen, it don't hurt so bad. But when you tie that many and the older you get, you can feel it. So if you can get your fly closer to where you're at, so you're not reaching out so far. And if you had a pedestal vise and sitting on top, what you end up with is it being too high. So you're up here tying up here rather than down here. The other thing I found is that if you got a vise extension, and let's see if I got a picture here, Tara came out with a vise extension, and these used to be about $50 to $100 if you bought them from the vise manufacturer or other sources. Tara now has these things for about $15. They're pretty sturdy, and it allows you to get your vise out, for me, a little farther, right over the top of my pan here, and right close to me. So I don't have as much stress in the back of my neck and shoulders by having this at the proper height. With this pan that's down here, and I can pull this pan out and dump it. This goes in a tracking right underneath my vise, and that allows me everything to drop in here. It also gives better clearance from the bottom of the pan to here. If I have my vise up here, I don't have as much swing. So I've actually got more clearance here by doing it this way. All my materials fall in the pan, and I'm at a comfortable height for tying. I've got a whole chapter on ergonomics in the book. I've also got one organization of materials in the book, but the one in ergonomics, a lot of people that tie close to the amount that I do, you'll develop pain in your shoulders and neck and stuff like that. So this just makes it a whole lot more comfortable tying if you got it like I do here.
Bob, some of us are lucky enough to find roadkill emu and those feathers, but where, if you don't have roadkill emus around your highways, where do you find emu feathers?
Well, don't jump into an emu pen because they get pretty mean. They'll have the better of you. But if you go to most fly shops, if they handle hairline dubbing sells them in packs. If you go online onto eBay, you'll also find them in the natural color, and you'll find them in different colors on eBay as well.
I
When I used to,
just found Oliver Wright restore.com selling emu feathers. They're cruelty-free emu. So they must be
cruelty-free.
asking them really nice. And
Well, yeah, they do after they're dead.
and if well, all right. They're also emu feathers in Broadhead, Fenimore, Monroe, Eastern emu farms, Eastern
Right.
County, Schaefer, Minnesota, which is over by Lino Lakes, and Antioch, Illinois. So those folks breed them for the meat and the leather.
In oil, for emu oil.
And they look at you sort of weird when you tell them you want a gallon Ziploc of emu body feathers.
Well, I used to buy them by the pound. I buy 2 pounds at a time from a ranch out in I think it was Arizona, and then they don't have them available anymore. But the last time I bought 3 pounds of emu feathers.
That should last you a year.
I'm running out.
Bob, couple of people have asked in the chat about the dubbing. Can you kind of go through that again, what you used?
Yeah, I use a coffee grinder, and I mix up a lot of my own dubbing to get exactly what I want. So I'll use ice dubbing and squirrel. Sometimes I got squirrels out in the backyard, they die of lead poisoning. So I end up cutting all the hair off the body, eating the squirrel, and then I take the hair, put it in a in a blender, and my wife bought me one because she was scared I'd use the one in the house, and she was right. So after that gives me a bulk, so I got gallon bags full of squirrel dubbing, and then I take and mix the squirrel dubbing with the ice dubbing, and I'll take out little patches. I'll take out a little equal amounts of each one of the colors, and then I'll also take the squirrel, and the combination of all the different colors should equal about 1/4 to 1/5 the total amount of dubbing. And I use the colors again. Ice dubbing is olive, caddis green, chartreuse, steely blue, purple, pink, and emerald green. So I mix all those colors into it. And that's that iridescent of all that ice dubbing shows through when it gets wet. And I think that helps. And the emu helps because it's got more movement in the water.
Bob, what's the difference between emu and ostrich in terms of quality for tying?
They're totally different feather. They're totally different feather. The consistency of the feathers is totally different. And the other thing with emu, when you do find emu feathers, a lot of times what happens, only bird that's got this way, but they get 2 feathers together. So when you get, let me see if I can go back to this. And come on, focus. Oh, I got this stuff in the way. Get rid of that. Then it'll focus. What happens, you get 2 feathers together. Oops, I get it there. Let me come out a little wider.
Another thing, I found that when searching for feathers online, emu is a lot easier to spell than ostrich.
It is. I grant you that. But they come together at one point. You get two together. But no, the consistency of an emu feather is totally different than ostrich. The other thing about emu feathers is that they're very tough. If you make just a regular hackle, the stem seems pretty tough, but this emu, the stems are generally tougher than just a regular hackle. We do it with a kids program when we have the kids tie down in Poinet, and we've been averaging about between Milwaukee Sentinel Sports Show and Poinet, we've been having about 2,500 kids tie a fly every year. And a lot of the flies they tie, we have them using emu. It's easier for them to use. They don't break the hackle when they're wrapping it. But I have found that for some reason, and I fished emu buggers compared to other buggers, and I actually do catch more fish off the emu than I do the regular ones. And I think it's a combination of that iridescent hackle underneath the motion of the emu in the water. The other thing I forgot, and I should tell you, is that I use different size beads and different weights. One of the things about any bugger is you want to get down where the fish are at, and that's dependent about how deep the water is and how fast the water is. So if I've got faster water, what I want to do is add more weight to it. So I might start out with just a brass bead. If I got shallow water dock southwest, I'll often use a brass bead rather than tungsten, and I go to the 5/32 rather than 3/16. If I want to get down into deeper holes, I might put on one of the 3/16. If I really want to get down some of the rivers out west, like the Bighorn, what I will sometimes do is use a lead-free wrap of wire and then a 3/16 bead on top of it that really weights it down. The problem with that, the more you weight it, the less action you get out of it. But if it comes to that and getting down to where the fish are at, I've got different weights of emu buggers depending on where I'm fishing.
Well, Bob, that was a great demonstration and thanks for the tips.
I wish that the equipment would have worked better. I just got this hooked up. I want to do a series of programs on tying tips and then have the first part tying tips and the second part problem solving. So if anybody had a particular problem, I'd try and work that problem out. In order to do that, I got to go live. I can't do a PowerPoint because I don't know what they're going to ask. So this will eventually get worked out, and I'll be doing a series of programs live on tying tips and problem solving.
Great. Well, thank you. Anybody have any other questions or suggestions for Bob? Any questions about all of this?
If you want, just out of curiosity, people say, what does your time station look like? I will give you a quick preview. I'll come back to a wide shot. Wait a minute here. I'll get to this one. Yeah, I get to a wide shot, and you will see. Oops. Why is it there? Here we go. Here we go.
There's Al Gustafson.
Yes. It's going to be 25 below zero up here tonight, up by Big Fork, Minnesota. I hope you've all got antifreeze in your tractors so the snowplows don't freeze up overnight. And
pretty mild here in Viroqua. It's only 4 below.
If you want to see my tying area, this is looking from my tying bench. This is one wall. Going down to the bench. And then I've got the same thing on the back wall. And then if I go on the other side of the wall is where I keep all my bulk material. I might have 15, 20 calf tails in a box here, but I might have 50 to 75 in bulk storage. And then I generally have anywhere from, probably a little better than 80,000 hooks in stock at any given time.
Wow.
When Bob starts buying, it's time to buy stock in plastic.
That's amazing.
Right.
I could tell you that up on a little obscure lake at the end of a mile-long dirt road in northern Minnesota, it's not that complicated.
I don't tie as many flies as I used to, but I still tie around 4,000 a year.
Well, when, like Scott says, you have more materials than a fly shop carries. So maybe you will have to do desperation orders to the Hazy fly shop.
So I think I'm going to give a quick thanks to everyone for doing this tonight, whoever helped out. I'm just going to stop recording and people can hang out as long as they would like, but I'm going to stop the recording thing now.
I'm good.